Right about now, you are listening to the Legacy and Leadership Podcast, a show where we discuss living as a leader worth following, leading others to do the same, and in doing so, leaving a legacy for future generations. My name is Jimmie Gonzalez Jr., a learning and development professional and leadership coach, sitting down with my co-host Anthony Devon Watts Jr., an expert contact center leader that has effectively led and developed dynamic teams with high motivation. Together, we have over 30 years experience in the corporate game. Join us as we discuss our growth as leaders, share the lessons we've learned, and interview others to see how their leadership style was shaped as they were mentored by adversity.
So what's going on, Legacy Leaders? It is I, your co-host, Devon Watts, here with my good friend, Jimmie Gonzalez Jr., back again for another episode of the Legacy and Leadership Podcast, The Hotness.
The hotness coming at you, episode number 9.
Episode 009. How you doing, man? How's your day been?
I'm doing well. The day has been good. I have got a little bit of a reprieve. So the senior leadership strategy session that I was supposed to be teaching, co-facilitating today, there's some good things going on, and we decided to push it back. Actually, our vice president of our business unit decided to push it back a few weeks. So I was not mad at that. While I was ready, we weren't 100%. We just weren't completely buttoned up. So it definitely gives us some time. This was things that we were kind of working on outside of our normal duties and work routine. So happy about that. But yeah, again, just, focusing on that and some other, projects and things that I'm investing my time into, just continue to get myself in a good space and move forward, man. So, right. We talked about having a plan and you got to work the plan. So that's what I'm doing.
Sir. Awesome, man. Awesome. How's the family?
Family's good. We just celebrated our anniversary this past weekend.
Hey,
the wifey and myself, thank you. 22 years. So the family's good. The youngest, she still seems to be doing pretty good right now with her classes. She got her new laptop last Friday. Yeah, so that was cool. So she's excited and happy about that.
Yeah, man, them kids, they love the technology.
Oh yeah,
I can't blame them. I love it too, but I want to sound like the stereotypical adult, like parent, just them kids, man, them and that technology.
Sort of. Well, I joke around. I say I'm the old man. So she was creating a PowerPoint. That was one of her assignments. Just kind of talking about herself and things that she likes and her parents and dislikes and stuff like that. So she's showing it to me, and I went to point something out, and I touched the screen, and it went to the next slide. I'm like, oh, my bad. Touch screen, you fancy over here. I didn't mean to do that.
Can you recover it? Control Z. Control Z.
What do we do? I don't know. I'm dropping my pen. I got all nervous. All kinds of stuff going on.
Bro, I'm dying because that legit has happened to me multiple times. Like, especially with this desktop. We got the desktop set up for the missus too, and I remember when we first got it, man, just the whole setup is all in one and it has the touch screen, right? And so I'm talking to her something about on the computer, and I'm like, hey, no, actually, hey, can you click here? And when I hit it, like I hit a hyperlink and it went to all, and so for a minute, I'm like, yo, what are you doing? Don't hit that. Hit this. And then I hit again, and then it goes to somewhere else. And then I realize, this is me. I'm the one. It's a touchscreen. I'm the one that's navigating to the wrong places. So, and I consider myself pretty technologically savvy, but yeah, it was what it is. I felt stupid for half a second.
Yeah, I just completely forgot, and I say we. I helped in the purchase of the laptop, but I didn't necessarily facilitate the purchase. So yeah. I'm not completely 100% sure of all the bells and whistles that it comes with. So, but it was funny. But she's good. Yeah, she's good. The presentation, she hasn't presented it yet, but I always have fun with that type of stuff, man. Obviously, not that I'm in
your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily an instructional designer, but that is in my wheelhouse. So having those kind of conversations with the daughter and seeing what she's capable of doing and giving her some tips, is always fun. It's always fun. So
yeah, man, it is cool. It's always cool when you're able to showcase to your family a little bit of like, yeah, pops knows some things. Like I be doing some things. I don't just be in the room like just talking and barking out orders and clacking on the keyboard. Like I actually do some things. So it's always cool when you get to share those moments, man. So I also couldn't help but notice, man. It seemed like for your anniversary, you guys ended up going out axe throwing, which is appropriate since we're coming off of talking about sharpening our saw a couple episodes ago. So the real question that everybody wants to know, they're holding their breath: how sharp was the saw or the axe when you were axe throwing? And did you actually hit like the bullseye? I don't know. I saw a cool little IG boomerang, but it didn't necessarily make contact. So I was like, I don't know where this landed.
So come on, man, it's your boy. What I will say is it's important. One, if you have you're gifted with some talents, and you have a good coach. And the young guy that was there, his name was Christoph, and nice. he broke it down. He broke it down, and I'm just like studying. I'm watching what he's doing, and took off from there. So yeah, I mean, the wifey too. She hit bullseye a few times. I hit bullseye a few times. I learned more about the game. You have the bullseye, but then there's the other like smaller blue dots that they have. And if you hit those that are kind of outside of the target, you get like 10 points for one, you get 20 points for the really small one. So how that is, you start doing something, you feel confident about yourself. And it's like, let me take it up another notch, another level, and see if I can hit those too.
Blue dots. But
it was funny towards the end how, he's observing us because he's helping other people, but he's walking around and observing us. And he was like, yeah, it's just funny watching the two of you. Like, you're so intense and you're focused. And my wife's like, yeah, he's intense with everything that he does. And, you throw the axe and you walk up, you get it, and you come back. And then your wife is just kind of, she's just doing her thing. It's no big deal to her. And I was like, yeah, that's us. That's life.
That's us in a nutshell.
That's the beauty of Stacy and Jimmie. So it was fun. We actually had a really, really good time. Just laughing and having, trying something new. It was something physical, so that's always fun for me. And it was a new skill that I was trying to learn. How do I get this and get the technique right? And like most throwing motions, right? It's all about kind of the hips and those type of things. So it was a good time.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah, it's something I'm gonna have to try. With the misses, and maybe even do like a team building exercise or something like that. We're going through the process right now of just kind of strategizing for the balance of the year. What does team building look like given kind of this new environment, and how do you create the opportunity to build some rapport and get to know people away from the workspace? And I mean, that's even more necessary today than ever before, when most of our interactions are happening through WebEx. Like, again, the bulk of my staff, to be honest with you, because when I came on board, it was in the middle of the pandemic, right? So the bulk of the staff has only seen me through like WebEx meetings, and hear my voice. And I like to think that while obviously I'm comfortable in this space, with the podcast and the whole nine and all that good stuff, that I just play better a little bit, face to face. Like I like that type of engagement and that type of interaction. And so how do you replicate that? So I'll definitely keep that on the list. We were talking about laser tag. We were talking about go-karts, and apparently there's like this new game that they've made out of kind of like go-karts or bumper cars called like Wiffle Ball or something like that. It starts with a W, but basically what it is you're driving around and you got like bumper cars, and you also have a ball at the same time, and there's like a basket on the side of your bumper cars, and like the objective is to score points into other people's baskets, basically. So that sounded really, really interesting, but I don't know if we even have like spots like that down here in South Florida. But yeah, man, just really trying to strategize what we can do from a team building perspective. So the bulk of my day was really centered around that, and I would say also team building in another way. I had like a litany of interviews just for roles in kind of my organization, and also helping out with some of the interviews for other parts of the organization, like L&D and human resources and stuff like that. We're just really trying to build out the team. And so, to me, I look at that as another form of team building, obviously, right? The most important skill you can possess to me as a leader is the ability to kind of identify and develop talent. If you do that right, you can not be good in a lot of other things and still, have a high performing team. And so kind of in that vein, it was funny because we were doing our debrief sessions after one of the final interviews. And I was just giving my assessment, and we decided not to extend an offer to this particular candidate. And I was just kind of explaining my reason why I wasn't inclined, and getting everybody else's perspective as well. And one of the things I shared was it's really important for me. Like, there's been work that I've been doing to build out my team, right? Build out my team from scratch, and I've inherited a couple of really good internals, but we've hired a bunch of externals here within the past 2 months or so. And so I've been very intentional about the dynamic of the team that I've been building, and to make sure that I'm protecting that. I have an obligation to be able to protect that if we're going to be able to drive the business forward. And the thing that kept ringing in my head, as I was just kind of talking with the recruiter and with some of the other stakeholders that helped through the panel interview process, was something that you mentioned a couple episodes back when we were talking about team building, and we kind of got on the path of culture and strategy and kind of those concepts, was affinity. And I remember when you brought it up, I was like, ooh, affinity, I like that word, and I'm gonna have to make sure that we come back to that. And in full transparency, the reason why it caught my attention is because, honestly, these past couple of weeks I've been on like a Marvel binge. I've been watching like a lot of Marvel movies because I'm a huge fan. And so I just like watched Infinity Wars and Endgame like back to back. And so when you said like affinity, I was like, ooh, Affinity Gauntlet? Like, does he say like we need to like hire a Thanos? That would kind of be cool, right? But then I realized, he said affinity, not infinity.
Yeah.
And I kind of had a little bit of a squirrel moment, but I'm making good on my commitment. I want to come back to that, and so
Okay.
I'm curious, for myself, and then obviously for our listeners, when you talk about building a team with high affinity, like, define that. What does affinity even mean? Like, what do you mean by building a team with affinity, high affinity?
So one of the first things that you want to think about, that word affinity, it has to be, and you mentioned this already, it has to be a high performing team. But what makes it a high performing team? It's speed of execution, right? Speed of execution and being able to execute at a very, very high level. So when you think about the definition, the depth of trust and confidence in a relationship is very high within the team, which again results in that speed of execution or maximum velocity of production. So a lot of trust, a lot of high confidence, and again being able to execute at a very high level, but do it very, very fast. In our everyday life, right, in corporate America, there's so many different practices going on, so many very important initiatives going on, and you would like the luxury of being able to, kind of take your time with things, but sometimes you're not. More times than not, you're not afforded that luxury, right? And you have to be able to execute very quickly, very decisively. But in order for, sometimes that's a little bit easier to do as an individual, but with the team, there has to be a lot of trust there and confidence in one another. We talked about it in the last episode, so if you're taking some of those concepts about how you empower people, if you're doing those things and working on those things, that's going to help, right, to build trust in your folks, and that's going to help to build their trust level in you as a leader. But point blank, moving with velocity, speed of execution, and doing so with excellence.
Okay. So when you say moving with velocity and speed of execution, and one of the things that comes to mind, like as you're saying that, and not that I'm by any stretch of the imagination like a fan of it, but it's like NASCAR racing, like a pit crew, right? Like I just that is one thing that I am like actually pretty impressed by within the sport, is just the level of communication, coordination, and execution during the pit stops like how quick that is, how fast that is, right? Because you're racing against the clock, you're racing against the other racers, right? Like I could be, when my car gets pitted, I could be in first place, and we're trying to time the pit properly, right? Because we don't want to have to make any other stops, for the duration of the race. And so there's a little bit of strategy there, but during that, like in that split couple of seconds, there's like 17 people they were rolling out. Somebody changing the tire, somebody checking the levels, somebody, making sure that the driver's hydrated and the driver has what they need. And all of that is happening simultaneously, and nobody's stumbling over one another. Everybody's communicating. Everybody knows where people should be. There's a high level of trust. Nobody's thinking, oh, is he getting that tire? Because he's supposed to get that tire, and I'm supposed to get this tire. Like, everybody has trust in their peer to execute on the task at hand, and they do it so fast, and then they're right back on the track. And so that's the thing that comes to mind when you're talking about, a team with high affinity. And being able to execute quickly, or speed of execution, all those things. Like I keep picturing NASCAR, and that's really all I know about him outside of like Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Jimmy Johnson or something like that.
No, that's a really a good analogy though for all the reasons that you just mentioned. As you're talking, I can see that picture in my mind, and like you said, there's just a lot of trust, and everybody knows their role. Right, you have certain guys that are focusing on filling up the gas tank. You have the other guys or gals that are focusing on changing the tires. You may have one or two that, one's taking one off, somebody's handing the other tire. So everybody knows their role, and they do it well, right? And there's a very high level of competence, within each of those skills. And with that high level of confidence and that high level of trust, they're able to execute, to that standard, and again at that speed.
Gotcha. So I would say transparently, right, if we're thinking about how do I know if I have a team that has high affinity, have I created or built or cultivated an environment where I have a team with high affinity? I think, selfishly, sometimes us as leaders, we have the opinion that we do, and we have like, oh yeah, my team has that for sure, right? But you know how I am. I'm a little bit more grounded or rooted in, facts and data. And so I'm curious, 'cause I know you've taught on this subject quite a bit and just broken it down with other leaders. Is there a process or a way for me to assess, like if I'm a leader, like how would I start to assess what is the current affinity level of my team, right? Like going back to my Marvel my Marvel thought that came to mind, like how do I know how many stones I've secured, right? Do I have like all 5 of them? Do I just got the gauntlet by itself? Do I got like the time stone and the mind stone, but everything else is not on point? So like how can I assess where my team is currently at, take stock of where my team is currently at, so that I can either celebrate and continue to do the things that have created high affinity, or I can pivot?
So knowing you and what you just said, right? So being all about the numbers and the data, like the first thing you have to look at is, are we hitting the mark? Are we achieving results? But then are we doing so at a very high level? Right. So in your business, in your space, you know what those KPIs are, those performance metrics that you're looking at to hit. Are we doing that at a high level, not just, kind of subpar or just meeting, but are we doing so at a high level? And then are we doing that at a consistent basis, right? If you're seeing that in the numbers, then you can kind of start to kind of reverse engineer and say, okay, well, what's getting us to that point? If you're not hitting your metrics, right? If you're not hitting your results and achieving results at high levels, then you're probably, especially if you're not doing it on a consistent basis, then you're probably not high in affinity, right? So that's number one. Are we achieving some results and doing so at a high level? But then again, how did we get there? In order to get results, especially again at a high level, and to do so on a consistent basis, like you have to be willing to take risk, but doing so in a calculated manner, right? Especially the higher you go, You said something last, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and leaders who have leaders and leaders who or have leaders that are leaders. And I'm like, say that 4 times really, really fast. I was just getting tongue tied listening to you say that. But the higher you go, right, and the more responsibility that you have, you still want to take risks, but you have to be very, very calculated in the risk that you take, because there's a lot of people counting on you. Again, the higher that you go up the ladder and the more responsibility that you have, you're not just representing yourself or the team. I mean, you're also representing the company, so you got to be very calculated in the risk that you take. But then some of the things that you might not necessarily be able to see on a spreadsheet. And again, it gets back to trust. So you can still analyze these things when you're having conversations on an individual basis, when you're having conversations with the team, when problems arise or when people are challenged and tough questions are asked, are people sharing how they feel with no hesitation? That you can take, you can get the vibe of that on a conference call or in the room, right? When we're in that setting, and do people trust that they can express how they feel and do so in a professional manner, but express how they feel with, without any type of negative repercussion. And maybe it's not necessarily the best idea, but as a group and as a leader, you can take that and you can build upon that. You can find value in the information they're providing. But again, they're doing so without any hesitation. And then when your team members are coming to you and sharing their concerns, when they're sharing any issues that they're having, even when they're sharing accomplishments, it doesn't have to be negative things, but when they're coming to you and like they're excited and they're happy to share those things with you, then there's a deep level of connection and there's a deep level of trust, right? One of the last things as a leader that I want is to find out that there's some type of concern or problem or issues that a team member or that my team members are having, but like I had to find it out through the grapevine, as opposed to them, again, trusting that they can come and that we can talk through it and that we can resolve it, we can get stronger because of it, and we can work through those things. So if you're not seeing those things, then you can, be assured that your team is not necessarily a high performing team and not necessarily reaching that level of affinity where they are a well-oiled, high performing team.
So there's a couple of things that you touched on that just kind of resonated with me. The first, obviously, starting off with measuring the performance of the business, right? So being rooted in your KPIs and kind of understanding from there, are we hitting the mark or are we not hitting the mark? And not just are we hitting the mark, but are we consistently exceeding the mark, right? Performing at a high level. And then from there, right, talking about like the openness and the transparency that would exist, and not just the overly solicited transparency, right, where you're like, all right, like, please say something, like, are you guys sure somebody's like, and then you have to start calling people out specifically, like, Jimmy, what are your thoughts on this, right? But where you could broach a topic with the team and people immediately jump in, providing their thoughts, their perspectives, again, with no fear of repercussions or being shut down or being played or anything like that, right? And so just kind of thinking about those two first, and I just want to sanity check this. My thought process would be that it's possible that you could actually be delivering from a performance perspective, like meeting the expectations, but still not have a team with high affinity, right? Because there could be external factors that are aiding in your performance. Maybe you guys figured out a brand new efficiency initiative, and so the system is working, or maybe you have external factors that are favorably impacting your business, right? Like, I'm in the e-commerce space, and so obviously the pandemic has been a boon into any company that's kind of in that e-commerce space, and so we're blowing all of our, beginning of the year targets out of the water. Well, that's because our forecast, our plan never accounted for everybody having to shop online and people, being concerned about going into brick and mortar locations and stuff like that, right? So just because I'm crushing it from a numbers perspective, it's still possible that within my team, I still don't have high affinity, or I don't have necessarily a high performing team in the sense of how we engage and communicate with one another. Am I off base in thinking that, or is there some truth in the kind of that thought process?
No, I would definitely say there's some truth there. I mean, but you know your business, right? So in your particular case, I think there's still things that you're learning about your new team, right? But even thinking about teams in the past, you know what those external factors are. So I know, okay, we've done some efficiency improvements. We've seen maybe some changes externally out in the market that is the cause, of this uptake in performance, or this increased performance, or even this very high level of performance. But then the question, and if my team are not necessarily exhibiting some of those attributes that we just shared, right, and that we just talked about, how much better could we be doing? If the team itself was running on all cylinders and then able to take advantage of those external factors that are also helping and adding to that performance. And again, we've been there. I mean, we've worked together and seen situations where we've made efficiency improvements and have done different initiatives, and you see the performance improve. But they're still not maybe 100% high level of trust, or people are not just automatically coming out and sharing how they feel about situations. They're a little reserved, or they're holding things back. So if we were able to clear that space and get everybody at that level, again, where there's a high level of trust and there's a high level of confidence in each other, then how much better, how much higher of the results can we actually achieve if we were hitting in all of those different points as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, the reason why, I just want to keep myself honest around that, and obviously also for our listeners, is you and I have both seen it. Sometimes as leaders, we make the mistake of just hiding behind the results to justify or cover up the other gaps that we know exist in our business. Because at the end of the day, if the final number is on goal, right, and that's ultimately what we're being held to, it can be very easy to not do the necessary work to address the other gaps, because you can say, but we're performing though. So, right, we're performing though. So I don't really have to worry about improving the communication with my team, because even with the communication being crappy, we're meeting expectations, right? We hit goal. Everybody got bonus. And I think, for a real leader, the perspective in that situation really is not we hit goal in spite of, but more, what could we achieve when I actually fix this, right? When we actually have the fundamentals of our team operating at the level that they need to. Because I think one of the things that is assured in any team sport or team situation that you're in, whether it's again, your team in sports, or your team professionally, or the team in your household, right? And over 20 to 23 years of just a beautiful team between you and Stacy, right? The team will be tested. Adversity will come, right? Like we've heard, we heard Shav kind of talk about that in his NBA session, and we know it, we lived it, in a multitude of different team arenas or environments where we will be tested no matter how well things are going for us, right? Hell, the Patriots almost, had the second undefeated season and beat the 72 Dolphins record. But what happened? They got tested in the Super Bowl, right, in the fourth quarter.
They met those New York football giants.
I instantly regretted using the example.
I know you did. You saw my face. I just lit up. Yes.
Yeah, I started because it's a good example. They got tested, but I'm like, oh man, but
let's reminisce.
They got tested by Jimmy's team. Like I'm about to give the Giants way too much credit.
For all of our viewers, yes, the New York Giants, my favorite team.
So
I digress.
Yeah, unfortunately, but fortunately, this is a good example. But the Patriots got tested, man. They got tested by your Giants, and I think the difference there, right, is and obviously, Nobody can question the legacy that Brady, Belichick, Kraft, all of them have built. They've done a phenomenal job, right? But in that moment, in that season, they had not faced adversity. They were steamrolling teams. I remember, like I think my boy Randy Moss was on that squad, right? So you got Tom putting up, the NFL record for touchdowns in a season at the time, and Randy Moss towards the latter end of his career still got them burners, and he set the single season record for receiving touchdowns. I mean, nobody could stop him on offense, nobody could stop him on defense. Now you juxtapose that with your squad, right? And a playoff spot wasn't assured going into like kind of the last couple of weeks. They had been tested throughout the season, right? So they had already created the necessary disciplines, transparent communication, all of those things that you would expect in a team with high affinity, so that when they got tested, when their back was against the wall, they already knew what they had. They had a certain level of trust because they knew what each other was made of and what they could bring to the table. And the Patriots, they hadn't been tested, so they never had to have that gut check or those conversations and to find out, hey, is the person next to me got what it takes? And the rest is history, right? The rest is history. And so I'm sharing that because, there can be times where the results say, you're the 18-0 New England Patriots, right? But what is the dynamic like in the locker room? What is the dynamic like in your meetings? What is the dynamic like when you're having your one-on-one discussions and when you're talking about challenges that the business is facing, successes that the business is facing, new initiatives? Like, is it like pulling teeth to get input from folks? Or are people comfortable expressing their ideas and challenging thoughts? I always felt like a really good measure, a really good sign of you cultivating a high-performing team is when people feel very comfortable asking questions and being able to challenge your thought process. Always done from a place of respect and obviously done with the intent of improving the business, right? But I just always felt like when people felt comfortable doing that, and it wasn't just me getting on my soapbox and running my mouth, but there was an actual dialogue, and I was being forced as a leader to be able to defend my perspective from an intellectual standpoint, or to talk through out loud with the team my thoughts around these things, and challenge people openly, and they do the same. Like, when we were doing that, I knew we were going to be in good shape because I knew that we had such a diversity in thought, such a diversity in perspective, and a high level of trust in one another. Like, really a high level of trust in one another that we can engage in those type of discussions that I never questioned after we left the meeting or left the room and we got alignment, if people were going to do that, if people were going to do what they said they were going to do. It was the meetings where there was not that type of discussion, and it was just, people, delivering orders and not engaging in robust discussion around it or having their thoughts challenged, that I always had the question, like, yeah, but are people actually going to do this? You know what I mean? Because that silence, and I've joked, I say this jokingly sometimes. I'm not even, most of the time jokingly, but sometimes I seriously mean it because I get annoyed if people aren't providing their input sometimes. But silence is consensus, right? But silence is not always consensus. Sometimes silence can actually be dissent. It's just that they don't feel comfortable letting you know why they don't agree or why they have questions out of fear that when I express myself, I'm going to be, I'm not going to be heard, or I'm going to be played. And so I think, to your point, you kind of know, results aside, as much as I love data and a good spreadsheet and a pivot table, right? As much as the data is there, the data is not the only deciding factor in measuring your ability to create a high-performing team with high affinity. There are also some of those immeasurable factors in terms of communication, in terms of trust, in terms of rapport, in terms of confidence, in terms of care, all of these things that you can measure with, EQ, emotional intelligence, and emotional quote, and not IQ, that you really have to have all the boxes checked on.
Yes, man. A couple of things that you said there. It's funny, when we first started talking about high performing teams and affinity, the Patriots did come to mind. but because of the longevity, right, of
Mm-hmm.
excellence and the longevity of championships that they've had.
That's a good point.
Um, but even in that longevity, they still had moments where, especially to their standards, they failed, right, or they didn't execute and hit that that mark and achieve their goals and what they were trying to achieve. Um, when you think about what just in business and what we're trying to do, your there's going to be those moments where, again, things are happening around you, um, and you're getting that level of performance. But it always goes back to things that you and I have spoke about in the past too. Is like, but how are we achieving those results,
Mm.
right? Did we achieve those results because with the high level of trust, there's a confidence in the competency of each other, and there's a confidence that maybe your skill set isn't as strong as it can be, but you're working on it. You're going to figure it out, and I trust that my team member is going to do that, or I know the level of the skills that they bring to the table, and I'm confident that they're going to be able to come through in those moments. But with those external factors and those things, assisting in that performance, when those external factors are not there, like you said, what type of level of production are we going to be able to achieve at that particular point? And when you talk about the trust factor, I think as a leader, you also have to check yourself, right? If you find yourself in that situation where you're having conversations, you're having meetings, you're talking about things, and people are not giving feedback, people are quiet, people are hesitant, you should, I encourage you to take a step back and check yourself and say, okay, well, why is that? Like, what am I not doing? What could I be doing better? We go back to the empowerment recipe. Like, am I following those steps, and am I giving my team the permission, and that comfort level to be able to speak up, and, like you mentioned earlier, to challenge my thoughts and to ask questions. If people really know that you care about how they feel about a situation, that you care about their thoughts and their different perspectives, I think that they'll be that much more likely to share in those moments. One thing that we talked about, some of the things that you would see in a team with high affinity, well, in a team with low affinity, like, people are not inspired, right? So maybe I don't trust, or maybe I'm just not inspired by my leader. So it just doesn't matter to me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, maybe there's not necessarily dissent. I don't care enough because I'm not inspired by the goal, by the mission, the vision, whatever it is. Like, it's just not there, so again, the leader has to check themselves and be able to ask that question, like, what can I do to have a stronger connection and speak into their hearts, so that I do have that opportunity to inspire them. They have to motivate themselves, but how can we be inspired about not just the goal and the results that we're trying to obtain, but how we're going to get there and the work that we need to put in. Because again, me, bro, it's, while I definitely want to attain results and I want to make sure that we're doing so at a high level, how do we get the results? Was it because we did something with the fancy systems and the systems allowed us to get the results? Was it because we had some people that were cutting corners, and when we started to dig down and really peel back the layers, we found out that there's things going on that maybe not maybe like we're not happy about it. It doesn't fit the values that we have and how we're trying to conduct our business. Well, we got results and we're doing so on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I mean,
but it's not the way that we want to get those results.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, Enron got results, right?
Facts.
Like, Enron got results for a short period of
Facts.
time until they got shut down, and Bernie Madoff got results, right? So it's interesting too. You say, just kind of like the motivation and the being inspired by the vision, and why that's so critically important. When you're talking about like creating or cultivating a high performing team and a team with high affinity. And it's funny because I was talking to a good friend of ours, and we were just catching up. Rich and myself, we were just catching up, like kind of chopping it up, and we were just laughing because We were both talking about the fact like you got to kind of bring that Lou Holtz factor, as a leader. I was sharing with him some of the things that I'm kind of navigating right now with my squad, and just I trust his perspective, and I use him as a sounding board, much like I use you, right? And so I was like, yeah, man, you got to bring that. He's like, yeah, you got to bring that Lou Holtz out. And then we were just talking about how, both of us, in our experience, we both have the ability to be able to inspire, our teams to want to, run through a wall for us to get work done. But we were also laughing about the fact that the way we go about doing that is just different, right? Just different, in terms of, how I communicate and how he communicates. And but the thing that, really resonated with me, or just like, I was like, well, look, yeah, I'm probably more of the, give him the old ball coach speech, type of individual, right? But where, he creates that same type of compelling desire to want to deliver, is, and you touched on this, the importance of, like being able to genuinely care.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so I think that aspect of it can't be overstated just enough, right? Not only is it important to make sure that, there is that transparent communication, and that you're creating an environment where people can feel comfortable challenging and asking questions and getting motivated by the idea or the vision, and that there is a high level of confidence in each other's competency, but also that there's a high level of confidence in each other's care,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you can't. That's one of those things. Like you can't fake that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It has to be authentic. You have to authentically care about the individuals, that you work with, that you lead, that lead you. Like that has to be genuine, because people can feel that. And I think you even touched on this. Like you can just feel it when it's not real. When it's put on. When somebody's pulling you into the office or the room, and it's like, hey, so how's the spouse, how's the grandkids, how are they doing in the school and the ball game, and you know what I mean, just kind of like, you're just going through the motions. You don't really care about what's going on with me. Like halfway through my answer, you're already thinking about what you were about to ask me for, or assign
Mm-hmm.
me to do. You know what I mean? And when you have enough of those interactions or experiences with somebody that may be leading you, or if your people have enough of those experiences with you, at some point, like you said, they check out. Like, why would I care? I'm not motivated. I'm not inspired. You don't inspire me. You don't motivate me because you don't care about me. I'm a tool to get to an end result for you, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to a valued member of this team. And going back to something that Shav touched on, right, that he got through Brene Brown, right, which is, true, true understanding is when somebody is, seen, heard, like known, right? Like that's when you really feel seen, like seen, known, heard. And when you think about creating a team of high performing team or high affinity, like you have to ask yourself as a leader, well, do my people feel seen? Do they feel known? Do they feel heard? Right? And if at any point the answer to that question, you're either not sure or you can say no, then there's work that you need to do on your part in order to shore that up if you truly care about creating a high performing team with high affinity.
Yeah, as a leader too, I think you would, if you're aware, right, and there's a decent level of self-awareness, like there's going to be times as a leader where you have to ask of your people. And somebody like Richard, like there's just so many things that we've been through over the last couple of years, so many challenging situations, right? And that trickles down to us, and like we're having to ask more of our people. And we have, campaigns, hashtag do more work, and like people want shirts made and they're happy to do more work. Well, why is it that I'm able to ask those things really without hesitation? Is because that level of trust is there. My people know, your team will know that you care. But if I'm hesitant, I'm like, man, like that there's not a high level of affinity when the leader is is timid or scared or reluctant to ask of their team, because either they're going to get pushback, they may get somebody to say no. There's just going to be some type of negative response. But if the team has high affinity, no, like when I ask, like you're going to do it, and not just because, oh yes sir, yes ma'am, like you feel like you have to do it, like they want to, because they know you care, because you care, they care about you. There's confidence, there's trust, and the thing about the trust too is that we've been in these situations. You might be asked to do something, but you may not always understand at the beginning 100% of what's going on, or 100% of why they're asking you to do this. But I trust that person. I know that they have my best interest in mind, because they do care about me. So you know what, I don't need all the details. Like, what is it that you need me to do? And give me the ball, coach. Let me run with it, and let me get this taken care of for you. So if you're hesitant to make requests of your team, again, as a leader, you have to check yourself and realizing there's probably not a high level of affinity.
Yeah, I like that. Essentially, like what you're saying is apprehension. Apprehension as a leader is usually an indicator of low affinity.
Yep.
Which I think is actually really spot on. It's funny because actually as a leader, like one of the best bits of advice that I actually got came from somebody who had never led a day in their life. It was one of the agents, and I don't know, I was having a conversation with them. I'm like on break or something like that. I was like going to the vending machine and seeing if I can get some peanut M&Ms or something. And I was just chopping it up. They were asking me how am I feeling about my transition, because I was a brand new leader, so I was kind of maybe about a month, maybe 2 months into it, and I'm feeling good and and I feel like a good relationship with my peers and these people, and they were like, yeah, and they were like, well, so like the only advice I have for you, right, is you just want to be mindful of the relationship you have with this person, right? It's like one of these people that are your peers. And I was like, well, what would lead you? Like, I value their perspective, so I'm like, well, what would lead you to like say that? Like, why would I need to be mindful about that? Like, I feel like I got a good relationship with that person. They were like, well, I can tell you just from how they interact with you, they act around you, even though they're a peer, they don't respect you, they fear you. And you don't want to be in a position where somebody fears you and they don't respect you. You want respect over fear every single time, right? And again, this is somebody who's never led a day in their life, like never had a single person reporting to them, but they just have this overabundance of wisdom to be able to understand that, when you're talking about how do you build a relationship that's rooted in genuine trust, legitimate trust, and that somebody has your best interest at heart, and vice versa. Fear can't exist. Fear can't exist in that relationship in order for it to be fruitful. It has to be rooted in genuine respect or affinity or care for one another, because if it's rooted in fear, it's going to be fleeting. They will comply or look out in the moment while that fear continues to exist, or it's present. But the minute that fear is removed from the situation, or you're further away from the situation, the less likely they are to have your back or run through a wall, because there's no motivation anymore, right? I'm not doing it out of respect for you. I don't respect you, and that just stuck with me, and it's been something that I've tried to carry with me throughout my career, as I've continued to grow and meet new people and get into different situations. Is I always wanted to try and establish relationships rooted in respect, genuine respect for the individuals that I've been entrusted to be a steward of and to work with, and to create an environment where me communicating transparently and being open to different perspectives and genuinely caring about my people fosters an environment of respect and trust in me. And so, yeah, I think a lot of the things that, you've kind of been touching on and we've been touching on throughout that process, it brings me back to kind of that moment in front of the vending machine, the little rinkety vending machines, and the call center on Forsyth. That super, like, yellow halls. Like, the halls were just, like, a ridiculous hue of yellow.
When I first started working there, it was like walking like into a jail or something. It was bad.
Yeah, man. And then there was like, it's funny because we had a couple of, not to digress too much, but
I'm
we
about
had
to say
like
the memories.
yeah, the memories are flooding in. But we had like a couple of training sessions. Like when I moved to another site, we had a couple of different training sessions back at that actual facility.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had leaders that went off for some leadership training and for a week, and they came back and they were just like, "Oh my God, I love our spot. Like I love where we're at. Like like that building. Like you actually had to work in that and da da da." And I took a little offense. I was like, "Look, hold on, hey, hold on. Y'all ain't allowed to talk about that building, right? I can talk about that building.
You can't talk about it.
I grew up in that building. Like you ain't allowed to talk about that building. Like that building has too many memories and." Um, man, just a special place, obviously a special place in my heart for sure. But yeah, it was janky, and yeah, we had those moments where the ceiling tiles were falling down, and there were bullet holes in the front of the building, and you could be on lunch break and witness somebody like stealing something out the outlet and taking off running. And you're like, somebody should do something about that.
I think they just took a TV.
Yeah, like, did they just take a lawnmower?
Stop. Don't.
Like, hey, don't.
Security.
Yeah, just people just bolt off, and you're just like, all right, well, let me get in here and check these reports.
But that was home, man. That was home.
Yeah, man, that's my spot, man. That's forever my spot. And now, obviously, the place I'm in right now is like, it's like super. It's an embarrassment of riches. It's super, super nice, and I just feel like, man, I feel like I'm like working in like a Google office or something like that, like Apple. Like there's a lot of technology here for just like a call center. But yeah, it's pretty dope.
Well, take advantage, man. But that also, speaks to, again, memories, the past, present, and just where you've come from, so, and how you've grown over the years and those opportunities have grown for you. So from talking about old buildings, rickety buildings, and building a team, high affinity teams drive results. Low affinity teams, they're just slow to react. High affinity teams are willing to take risk. Low affinity teams are risk adverse, right? With high affinity teams, there's a high level of confidence, a high level of trust. The leader inspires people. Individuals speak freely without hesitation to share ideas, to ask tough questions of their peers and even of the leader themselves. When there is low affinity, you just don't see that. People tend to keep to themselves, are withdrawn, and just energy is low. People don't have fun with each other. When you see a team that has high affinity, people are having fun. They genuinely enjoy being around each other, and you can't fake that. Like you can't fake that. You can see that. You can feel it. And when you start to see those glimpses on a consistent basis, again, either you're getting there or that this team definitely has a high level of affinity.
No, I appreciate that, man. So, I guess kind of the last thing then I would just ask, right? So you go through that process and you do an assessment and you find out, my team, we have glimpses of some of these competencies that would align with a team of high affinity, a high performing team, but it's not consistently there. And I've done a little bit of a gut check for myself as a leader, and I got to tighten up on some things. So like, where do I start? Like if I had to pull you in as a coach or a leadership coach or a consultant or just a sounding board, where do I start with building it if it's not there? Like, where do I start at?
So being resolved. You have to be resolved and be intentional about building strong relationships with your team. That has to be a priority for you. It has to be something that you think about and that you're intentional about doing. Genuine care that just has to come from that person. But there are steps that you can take. I think the more you know about somebody and the more you know about their situation, I think the deeper and the higher level of care that's going to be. So there has to be, intentionality about having those conversations and carving out time for those conversations, especially when things are moving 100 miles per hour and we have to get results now and things are moving so fast. How do I make time for those moments where there can be that true connection? You have to be committed to the team and the collective success, right? And it's not You got to be committed to the individual, but again to the team, because we're all in it together, right? So as an individual, I have to make sure that I'm committed to building that relationship, to empowering you, to helping you develop your skill set, but I'm also doing that for everybody else. What that looks like and how much I provide might be different, based on where people are at, their skill sets, their level of experience. But I'm making sure that the fairness is coming through because everybody is getting it. Whatever that it is, everybody's getting that level or that attention that they need. And then just paying attention, man, paying attention to the affinity on the team, because again, we're talking about highs and lows, right? In business, we have business cycles. You're going to see that when you're looking at the numbers, you would like to say that everything is always going to be going up, but that's just not the case.
Right.
And when you talk about energy, you're going to see that the energy is very high. You're going to see that the energy is very low. So when you see that, be cognizant of that and start to ask yourself questions. Make sure that you're doing pulse checks with your team. At the beginning, you were talking about doing team builders. Well, that's something that we should always be looking to do. But maybe there's an impromptu, team builder or just some type of activity that you do. Because again, you're sensing that the energy is getting low, and that I need to do something, to bring that energy back up. Maybe it's having fun. Maybe the energy is low because there's something going on in the life of one of the teammates, and that, not in a negative way, but a lot of calories and focus is being put on that individual by the other members on the team, but you don't know about it. So if I can step in and I can provide some additional support and alleviate some of those responsibilities as well from the other teammates, those type of things again that show care and that I'm being intentional about doing, continue to raise the energy levels back up with the team. You have to be resolved, you have to be committed, and you have to pay attention to those energy levels and change the dial, right? And as you see the levels going up and down, how do I make those adjustments so that I at least keep us balanced and we would like to be, or make sure that if we take a dip, that it's not a sustained dip and that we get ourselves back up as quickly as possible.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like that. I like the kind of the direction of being resolved,
Mm-hmm.
right? Being resolved or being intentional about addressing the gaps there and finding ways to incorporate a little bit of spontaneity and
Mm-hmm.
flexibility in addressing maybe the energy gap that exists, or if you realize that maybe part of the reason why the team as a whole is not necessarily exhibiting some of those characteristics of high affinity is because of maybe a specific relationship you have with one of your direct reports that hasn't blossomed to the point where there's that level of trust,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like kind of that's the last missing piece, right? Like, all right, I have good history with Jimmie. Jimmie knows who I am. We came up together. Right. I got really good relationship with Richard. Richard and I, we know each other. We've had each other's back for 4, 5, 6 years. Right. But my relationship with Devon, though, I just haven't been able to develop that level of care and connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to be intentional about pouring into that relationship, because I need, that's the last person that I need to be able to connect with so that I can really unlock the potential of this team. Because Jimmie has no problem, openly sharing his perspective and, challenging me on my ideas and helping to think through some dynamic solutions. Same with Richard, for sure. He's bought in. But Devon, if I can't get the buy-in and the connection there, we're not going to be able to unlock our full potential as a team. Because, obviously there's a lot that individual brings to the table. I value their perspective, but it's not being contributed right now. And so, we're not as good as we can be. And being aware of that. And then I also like just the challenge, you kind of extended throughout this entire thing, which is, the level of self-awareness as a leader that's really required in order to make sure that you're not resting on your laurels and
Mm-hmm.
you are constantly challenging and assessing your team's performance, and am I executing or are we delivering on these attributes that are needed in order to have a high performing team. And then if not, the minute I realize that we're not, like, being resolved and committed to doing something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to be committed to having a high level of awareness, which takes effort. That takes time. Again, it takes commitment. Some of us are gifted with that high level of emotional intelligence, and then some of us have to work at it. But you just have to realize, the how worth it is for you to invest those calories to putting in that type of work. We talked at the beginning about the fact that, celebrating 22 years of marriage. And, I remember my pastor told me a long time ago, like, you need to study your wife, and you need to have a PhD in Stacy. And while that is very much true, even with your team, like, you need to study your team, and observe them, and just observe how they say things, when they say things, why they say things, observe body language. And the more in tune you are with your team, the higher level of awareness that you're going to have. And I think the easier it's going to be for you, to start to make those adjustments on those energy levels and just be there for your team, because you're not missing things. So study your team. I definitely encourage you guys to really study your team. And how can I put in the work to get first a bachelor's, then a master's, and then hopefully, depending on how long those relationships last, in the workplace, a PhD in my direct reports, so that we're all, again, running at high levels with efficiency, with speed of execution, and we can truly say that we are a high affinity team.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, I'm just thinking, like, as you're talking through that, like, both of us being fortunate enough to, work not just together, but with other individuals for a substantial period of time. When you think about just kind of the corporate environment and, business in general, like, if you're spending like 2-3 years with the same kind of cast of characters, you're probably in pretty good shape, and on the higher end of the spectrum in terms of longevity working together. And I know for both of us, and for some of the folks that are listening that had the opportunity to work with myself and with Jimmie, when you build a certain level of just rapport and affinity with one another, like, there's a lot of nonverbal communication that you can just immediately pick up on, because, like, I've studied, I study these people, right? So I know, the facial expression that Jimmie makes when he hears something he ain't like, and vice versa, or people know the facial expression I make when I hear something that doesn't make sense to me, and, like, I just don't believe that it's accurate. You know what I mean? And I can't help it. It's just the nuances of who I am as an individual. And so, to your point, that's something that I obviously aspire to be able to cultivate. Even with my new squad, with my new team, and this new organization, is being able to pick up on those nuances and be like, oh, okay, it ain't like that, right? Or nope, they don't agree with what I'm saying right now, or they have questions, and I should be aware of that enough to be able to preempt it, lean into it, have an open discussion about it. For me personally, I won't be satisfied until I'm able to consistently do that. And when I'm able to consistently do that, then I know that I'm on the right track to building the necessary affinity in my team to be a high performing team.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, man.
So we mentioned it at the beginning, and we'll just kind of wrap up as well, just with confidence, trust in that relationship is at a very, very high level. And when that trust and the confidence is at a very high level, again, there's that speed of execution and that production and that output at maximum velocity. And the communication is on point. Again, even for some of the little things that you just mentioned as well, but those little things really, really add up that make the difference in just being an average or above average team to a truly high performing team with high levels of affinity on a consistent basis.
For sure, man. For sure. and it's fitting too. Like I know when I started this, and I kind of share with you, like, oh man, I heard him say Affinity, and then it got my Marvel mind going.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just great movies, just really good writing, great acting. Um,
Awesome movies.
yeah, but Gauntlet is still appropriate, not in the sense of the armor version of the definition, but Gauntlet in the fact that like a challenge, the things that you're talking about, can definitely be challenging to cultivate, to create. You have to work at it. You have to be intentional. You have to work at it, but it's fruitful. It's fruitful work. It pays.
Amen, brother. Yeah.
It pays dividends multiple times over. And so, while it may be challenging to get to that point, right? When you go through the Affinity Gauntlet, your team is better for it in the long run. You're better for it in the long run as a leader, and you're able to really unlock a different level of success, consistent, sustained, tested success, where you have confidence that regardless of what the situation, the external factors are, we have the right makeup internally. As a high performing team to overcome those challenges and still be able to deliver at the level that we expect.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, good words, man. So I'm glad that we came back to the topic of Affinity and building Affinity in the team. Seriously, that was something that I really wanted to make sure that I didn't pass up, because I know you've done a lot of work here recently, from a leadership development perspective with some of the senior leadership in the organization that you're at. To kind of really flesh out and talk about these very concepts and really work towards assessing, challenging, highlighting people who are doing it well, and continuing to work towards building and raising that level of affinity within the team that you guys have there. And so I thought it'd be fruitful for our legacy leaders to get some of the the benefit of that work that you're doing and that insight, and be able to add that to their arsenal as well.
Sure. I mean, it's a concept I've been studying. I mean, I think these are things that innately we've kind of worked at, but in this concept and kind of putting it, using this vocabulary is something that, I've been studying and teaching and really working through myself and then with the team over the last couple of months. So I hope our legacy leaders have gotten, again, some good nuggets out of the conversation, and again, have at least a good overview of what it means to cultivate and to grow and to know, is my team a high affinity team or not, and then taking some of those steps to be able to groom and grow and nurture them to be able to be that at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, right? So that we can get the results that we're looking for and get them at a high level and at a consistent basis. So that wraps up episode number 9 for us.
Hey,
yeah,
episode 9 is in the book. Oh, so we're coming up. We're getting ready to break ground on double digits next episode. It's episode 10.
Yeah, episode 10. So we're talking about empowering your team, empowering your direct reports, and how important that is, and the empowerment recipe. We just talked about what does it mean to be a high affinity team. In order to do so, you got to get the right pieces, on the team. So as we start looking at the next, couple of episodes, we'll be diving into that too. Some tips and things that you should think about in regards to what does that look like. How do you determine people's strengths? How do you add, additional strengths to the team that maybe you don't currently have, so you can shore up, some of the gaps on the team. And so how you're not building a team with people that are just like you, right? Because that's not good for you as a leader. It's not good for the rest of the team. We want diversity in so many different ways, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll definitely be diving into that over the next episode or two. So looking forward to that. We just thank everybody again. Before we jumped on here, I was looking at some of the numbers. I know you were doing the same. My man lives in the numbers. I appreciate that about you. I have to work at that, but again, it's you got to put yourself through the gauntlet to continue to improve your skill sets and things of that nature and develop. But we just hit, I know, on Podbeam, so we're well over 500 downloads when we take a look at all of the podcast platforms that we're on. So again, thank you to our listeners again. for riding with us. We just hit over 500 views. We're about 550 views right now on the YouTube channel. Yes. So keep listening, keep watching. Again, we are trying to bring you the goodness every single week and give you some new concepts or maybe, just a different way to think and look at some older concepts that maybe you've come across in the past. So keep challenging us, ask us questions, whether you send us an email or direct message us. Again, we are on Instagram at Legacy Leadership. We are also on Twitter at Legacy Leadership. You can find us on Facebook as well, Legacy in Leadership Podcast, and of course our YouTube channel. So if you'd rather, again, for our visual learners out there, if you'd rather take a look and see some of the additional things that we do, within the vlog itself, you can find us at Legacy in Leadership Podcast. That is our YouTube channel. So hit the alert button, please, so that you're always alerted when we have videos coming out, and subscribe as well. We definitely appreciate that. Give us a comment, if this has resonated with you. If you had some additional questions about, this concept of affinity and high levels of affinity, leave us questions in the comments, or if you have anything that you'd like to add, do so as well. We definitely appreciate continuing the conversation with you guys as well. So we thank you for riding with us, for listening, for watching, and until next time, this is Jimmie Gonzalez, co-host of the Legacy and Leadership Podcast, along with Anthony Devon Watts Jr. Thank you, guys. Take care and have a good night.
Bye.
Rage on that beat, going crazy.
You have just listened to the Legacy and Leadership Podcast, hosted by Jimmie Gonzalez and Devon Watts. Thank you, and we hope that you live, lead, and leave a legacy worth remembering. Until next time.